Hello, and welcome to the GlassHouse webcast. Today's topic, Private and Public Clouds, Business Case to Reality, will be presented by Richard Scannell, GlassHouse's Senior Vice President. GlassHouse is delivering on the promise of private and public cloud offerings to enterprise and service provider clients globally. As Head of Corporate Development for GlassHouse, Richard is actively engaged in setting the strategy for the company as we pursue and deliver cloud-related projects and regularly interfaces with our executive clients who are tasked with realizing the benefits of cloud computing for their companies. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Scannell.
Thanks, Natalia. So as Natalia mentioned, we're going to spend some time today talking about the challenge of building a business case around cloud and cloud adoption. But to begin with, I wanted to just review essentially the backdrop to where this need came from. And historically, for IT services of a given application or perhaps a given business model, where the need for capacity ebbs and flows over time. One kind of simple example to think about is the demand for additional capacity in IT systems in a retail environment at the holiday period. But it's very typical that with most businesses, you're going to have this up and down cycle of demand. Added to that then is the fact that typically IT purchasing is done in large incremental chunks. So storage is now bought in petabyte increments in certain organizations. Servers are bought by the hundreds in many places. So you have this one-time large spend to offset against an anticipated future demand. And there are two real challenges with that. One is where we have lots of capacity sitting around and not necessarily the demand to soak it all up. And even worse, situations where we have significant growth in demand and are unable to respond to it quickly enough with additional capacity in our IT systems. And anybody who's been in IT infrastructure for any period of time will easily recognize this paradigm as the way we've operated for some significant number of years. The promise of cloud computing is to match up the demand side with a supply paradigm that can grow and shrink in very, very similar and very, very rapid response to that demand side. And so this ability to scale out and scale back very rapidly to say just slightly ahead in terms of supply to the demand side is a promise that cloud computing has set up that all executives and business owners are pursuing. And so there are multiple different types of cloud solutions, and starting at the bottom of this in terms of delivery models, there's software as a service. Anybody who's heard of or is familiar with Salesforce.com, it's probably the poster child for that model. Platform as a service tends to be a combination of multiple elements of infrastructure as a service, possibly layered up with some middleware. So things like the Force.com platform that is provided by Salesforce.com would be an example of that, where you can leverage a bunch of defined interfaces and a set of capabilities underneath it. And then infrastructure as a service, which is what we're going to spend most of our time focused on, typically either computing capacity or storage capacity in an on-demand model. And then there's lots of different what we would call deployment models. So there's private clouds, which are, the assets are owned by the enterprise. They are provisioned only to members of that enterprise. There are public clouds, which are essentially provided by service providers. This is, the electric company for your IT needs. So very defined standard set of offerings, multi-tenancy at the back end, where you essentially don't know where your application is running with some constraints around geographical need. And then there are all kinds of variations of that, hybrids and virtual private and a whole bunch of different models as well. And then some of the characteristics that we typically see associated with cloud computing. So one of the most definitive of what a cloud is this whole idea of on-demand self-service. So the ability for the person who has the need to be able to request and essentially provision capacity against that need with really no human intervention from an IT organization or person. This idea of rapid elasticity, where I can scale out or scale back depending on my need at any given time, and some of these other characteristics that you can see in front of you. So one of the things then that you want to think about is as you think about the developing a business case, is really what is the difference between a public and a private cloud in terms of some of the characteristics that are going to fall into a business case. And so one of the ways that we're talking about this is this idea of supply chain. And historically, IT architectures were built around just-in-case architectures. So just in case the data center burns down, we'll have a redundant data center, we'll have a DR site. And then just in case the server running the application crashes, we'll cluster that with another server. And just in case the storage array goes down, we'll replicate that data to another storage array. And just in case the power goes down, we'll have a redundant power feed, and we'll have redundant networks, and on and on and on. And so there was tremendous amounts of spending to harden the architectures just in case something happens. So a huge amount of spending around this idea of a just-in-case architecture. Public clouds, or clouds in general, are designed around a just-in-time architecture, and if you remember that demand and supply curve, the idea is that you can request and provision an additional capacity just in time for the needs of your application. And so private cloud, where the enterprise continues to own the assets, don't get really away from this problem of having to buy in large increments. But the idea of a private cloud is to layer on that just-in-time capability to a just-in-case architecture. So I continue to have this very robust architecture that I, as the enterprise, own, but I want to have the characteristics of cloud, that ubiquitous availability and scale out on demand. So we're going to layer on just-in-time capability. Public cloud, on the other hand, is really defined by just-in-time, but there's really no benchmark for just-in-case architecture. So most of these providers will publish a 9s statement, a 3 nines, or a 4 9 statement. But as we stand today, there is no universal benchmark that we can go and compare one public cloud provider towards another. Their ability to drive cost reduction is driven by the fact that they will operate multi-tenant environments, and they'll look at workload diversification so that they can match up workloads from one user that is CPU intensive with perhaps another user that's memory intensive or bandwidth intensive. And they drive cost efficiency by driving high utilization on their assets, leveraging the multi-tenancy of their client base. So as you begin to think about a business case then, looking for economic return versus looking for time or time to market return is really where we're going to spend some of the rest of the conversation. So there are, in a backdrop, there are really two major thrusts going on from a CIO or IT head perspective. One is at the end user level, where the demand for change of the end user experience has really accelerated over the last couple of years, driven predominantly by the proliferation of devices and the mobility of those devices. So that calls in the need for mobility solutions, obviously changes in the security world, the virtualization of applications so they can be delivered to all of those various virtual devices. At the same time, the world of the data center is changing drastically. So back in the 90s, all applications ran essentially on dedicated hosts. You wanted to add a new application, you went out and you bought a bunch of new hardware and software, and you ran that on a set of dedicated host environments. Then about 5 or 6 years ago, virtualization really took off, and we began to run our applications on what we would call dedicated virtual environments. And many organizations varied in terms of their ability to get off of dedicated hosts and onto dedicated virtual. I think the average in the industry is somewhere between 35 and 40% right now. And there's lots of people who have done a lot better than that, and there's still a lot of people actually who have not gotten very far on a virtualization campaign. Nonetheless, we still saw most of those environments being dedicated. In other words, new application was deployed or an expansion of an application was deployed, 10 or 15 or 20 VMs were set aside to run that, and essentially once they were carved out, they were never revisited again, irrespective of whether they were being used or not. So we continued to buy a lot of hardware, essentially assign a set of virtual machines to a server, and then not really have the tools available to track usage against that and be able to respond very quickly to scale out needs of the application. Now we're being asked to develop both a public and private cloud strategy. So we go from essentially 10 years ago having a very simple one-layer data center architecture from a delivery perspective to now having potentially up to 4 layers in that architecture, albeit while trying to meet the demands of a rapidly changing delivery mechanism of the application from an end-user experience perspective. And so what most CIOs are trying to figure out is what percentage of my environment should be overlaid on each of these layers. I think everybody continues to believe there will be portions of the environment, those very old legacy applications, which will be tied to dedicated hosts for a significant period of time to come. We will probably continue to have some of the environment be in a dedicated virtual model, at least for some period of time, though that's probably the environment that will ultimately disappear. Then developing a private cloud strategy that will presumably take a lot of that dedicated virtual environment and be moved into a private cloud, and then trying to understand what the implications of public cloud can be from both a cost and then also security and compliance perspective. And at least as we stand today, typically what we're seeing is the cost of providing those environments decreases as you go down that stack. However, the risk that clients are willing to operate on those environments tends to also be much lower the lower down that stack you go. In other words, the things that are happening on public clouds are not of a mission-critical nature, and we continue to see the applications most tied to revenue continue to operate in dedicated virtual and all the way back up to dedicated host environments. So this is the world that we see our executive clients facing. And it's kind of multiplied by a complexity which is as follows. The change in the end user experience is predominantly driven by the business's perception of incremental revenue opportunity by mobilizing the workforce. So if I can turn my truck drivers into order takers as they're delivering an order, and give them a mobile device that will allow them access to, a credit card reader and, take an order right there on the spot, I have an opportunity to seize incremental revenue. However, I now have a device that's mobile in a relatively unskilled worker's hands with customer data, so I've got compliance issues, etc. Nonetheless, that predominance of mobility being driven by the belief that there is incremental revenue opportunities. While at the same time, the opportunity to move or the demand to move from dedicated virtual into a cloud being driven predominantly by time to market considerations. So the faster I can provision new infrastructure, the faster I can get new versions of an application to the customer and therefore reduce my cycle time to market. And at the same time, that existing pressure that's been around forever in IT, which is cost reduction opportunities as we drive from dedicated hosts to some cheaper platform on which to operate those environments, allowing us to essentially drive higher levels of utilization across the infrastructure base. So we see these two major worlds of change being driven by 3 different business imperatives. And historically, IT has been asked to respond to 1 or maybe 2 of these at a time. So the whole order-to-cash revolution that took place, the whole World Wide Web revolution that took place, were driven either by an incremental revenue or time to market vector, but not necessarily expected to deliver cost reduction at the same time. Then the world of the 2000s was all about cost reduction as we deployed virtualization and tried to strip down highly isolated and dedicated environments. So that was driven around predominantly cost reduction. Now we're seeing these two major focus areas supporting three business imperatives. It is a time probably of unprecedented change in terms of the way IT is being consumed and delivered. So there are some significant changes then organizationally in terms of the way that IT communities have to think about their responsibility. If you remember the slide where we talked about supply versus demand, historically IT has been an organization focused on the supply side of that problem. So most of our time was spent in terms of trying to get additional or new or refreshed capacity available to our customers. And a huge amount, if you were to just kind of Pareto out the amount of time spent in IT doing supply side activities versus trying to understand demand, you would probably typically find 95+% of time spent on the supply side. Now what's interesting as we move to certainly public clouds, but even in theory private clouds to a large degree, where a significant amount of that workflow is orchestrated and automated, what IT has to get a lot better at is demand side understanding and spending time with business partners to get an understanding of what those growth curves will be in terms of the public cloud, so that we can manage and govern the economics associated with the bills that are going to start to show up. And in the private cloud model, because still underpinning that entire model is the ability to continue to bring in additional capacity, essentially in large chunks or blocks, put it in under the technology of the cloud, and allow it to be delivered and provisioned seamlessly to the end user. So it calls for a change from an organization that has been predominantly technology-centric to being much more service-oriented and service-centric, and an entire new set of governance models that historically we really haven't had to operate. So the way that we do vendor management and sourcing will change dramatically. The whole idea of defined service catalogs and a portfolio of offerings that is managed and governed and reported on both operationally and financially is really a step up significantly for many of our IT organizations. So then GlassHouse really looks at the cloud market in two slightly different paradigms. And we talk about working with clients who are looking to consume cloud services, and at the same time we have a set of offerings to help clients understand how to provide cloud offerings. And of course, as an enterprise, you may find yourself in both scenarios, looking to consume from the public cloud and looking to provide in terms of developing a private cloud. From a service provider's perspective, more focus typically on the providing cloud services need. And so we have developed a set of services you can see in front of you to help you to essentially, first of all, get a very simple baseline understanding of what your needs are, and then go through essentially a set of strategy engagements, or an engagement around a strategy that allows you to understand essentially what can the cloud or various cloud technologies provide to your business at both an operational and a financial basis. And we work through that, essentially driving what we call a candidate selection process that allows us to, with your participation, look at your application set and determine what that right fit for purpose is from that 4-layer stack that we had discussed: dedicated host, dedicated virtual, private, and public cloud. And then essentially we get to what we call this line of readiness, which is the point at which you're going to begin to do migrations into some cloud capability, be it private or public. But really, from the time you cross that line, you have to have your new operating model defined, and you have to have a way to really measure application performance from that point on. So there's a lot more work to be done than just kind of the, again, classic IT position of building the technology associated with that private or public cloud. So yes, there's a technology project to layer on the capabilities of cloud, the service catalog, the orchestration, etc. But there's a lot of work to be done to ensure that the day you cross over and start to leverage that, you as an organization are now ready to meet the needs of clients who are operating a cloud model. And then we've got a set of offerings to help you essentially determine what that technology stack should be in both a private or public setting. And then we go through the deployment model. And really, you've got a fork in the road when it comes to a private cloud. You've got the development of a private cloud to support next generation applications that we believe are already starting to be built by most of the application developers out there, albeit in public cloud environments, the Amazons of the world. And so you really need to start to develop a private cloud strategy if you have a community of developers in your company, so that as they come back with those first generation cloud-built applications, you have a platform that will allow them to take advantage of those scale-out capabilities. The other side of that fork is the due diligence around your existing infrastructure and applications to just determine what portion of them could be migrated into, again, that fit-for-purpose model. So there's a classic discovery and then a transformation process at either the infrastructure end or at the application level. There's a migration process and then an in-life service. On the other side of that coin, there's the entire process then of helping clients to provide cloud services. And similar type of words that you're seeing from an offering perspective, and essentially, again, a very simple process of allowing you to understand really what is the opportunity for you, and then those strategy engagements, an impact analysis, which is essentially doing the due diligence on both the technology and the business case. And again, remember we talked about the fact that you're layering on just-in-time capability to your existing architecture. There may not be a lot of cost reduction opportunity there, but there could be significant time to market opportunity. If you're looking at public cloud and you're looking to provide public cloud as a service provider, then you're going to want to understand how the economics of that offering stack up against both competitors and a private cloud capability that the client base you're targeting will be trying to build. So going through that strategy engagement to develop, again, both that technical architecture and business case, and then moving again past this line of readiness. So you could essentially say that everything to the left of that line is a pre-production set of services and a pre-production stack of work that you need to go through to do your due diligence, to do your analysis, to build your architectures, to build your process models, to build your financial models. And then at some point you cross over into the world of providing this operational service, and really the day that happens, lots of things now start to change. And so again, we work with clients through that, what we refer to as a modernization phase, to essentially allow you to provide those services out to your client base. Working again in terms of the development of that detailed architecture and allowing you then to go through the process of examining the application base and signing up clients to your cloud offering. And we use a defined reference architecture that we at GlassHouse have developed. And there's lots of these types of reference architectures out there. This is one that we have developed to understand both the technologies that you have in your existing environment as well as perhaps some of the other newer or existing suppliers who are bringing new capabilities to the market. And so we use this as a way of overlaying those technology stacks and then thinking about things like the whole governance model around your service catalog, your integration with other either cloud providers or applications, and your interface for your developers in terms of scale-out capability. There's a whole service management layer around the metering and the billing, and in many cases what we found is that can be somewhat the red-headed stepchild, where again a lot of the technical aspects of this come together relatively quickly, but the back-end integration into historic business systems really becomes somewhat the critical path in terms of delivering a fully automated provision to bill cycle in terms of a cloud. And then, of course, one of the things that you can't lose sight of is the fact that this entire process is centered around applications. And so essentially needing a process to go out and look at your application stack and determine that fit-for-purpose capability, and then define a process by which you can look at the risk associated with those applications, so that just because you can move something doesn't mean you should move something to one layer versus another. And so we have a process that we go through called a complexity analysis, where we can work with you to profile the application, pulling in data from multiple different sources, and essentially coming up with a selection process as to how that application gets placed on dedicated virtual, private or public. And then in order to prepare for the migration process, and this is really one of the most complex parts of the whole undertaking, how do you migrate these applications that have historically been interwoven across multiple different assets in your data center? And so we use this prescriptive data structure to build a model of the application, understanding that typically applications group together to support a business process. In our example, we have this idea of online banking. And at an end user experience, I'm either going to determine that online banking is working or not. The fact that there are 22 different applications or 150, whatever it is, that make that up is really irrelevant to me. I'm going to have an experience that I either believe is positive or negative. So understanding what all of those applications are and how they are tied together via both upstream and downstream data feeds. And then typically each one of those applications will have multiple instances, dev instance, test, prod, etc., QA. And each of those instances will have a whole bunch of elements, executables, middleware, databases, etc. So you can see how this business process then begins to fan out in terms of dozens or hundreds, or in certain cases thousands of individual application elements that need to be considered for placement, because you may take a different approach to your production instance. Obviously, you would take a different approach to your production instance from, say, your dev or test instances. And then this is where the challenge then comes in, because you then have this overlay onto your virtual and physical infrastructure environment. And the reason this is complex is because you have many-to-many relationships. Every physical asset now typically supports multiple logical things, and every logical application lives on multiple physical assets. And so the decoupling of those applications is a non-trivial process. And as you consider the ability to migrate an application to the cloud, you're really looking for the weakest link to understand, as you look at the risk profile, what pieces can be migrated and what cannot. And then ultimately you get all the way down to the data center. You know, what rack is this in, what slot, in what room. And so we have some IP and obviously a very defined process to go through that allows you to consider how your migration will occur. Because if you go out and kind of brave this new world and begin to migrate applications and stumble, your entire cloud strategy will be at risk for some period as your business pushes back very aggressively and says, you know what, just leave this running on its own dedicated environment. I don't care about cloud technology. I just need to be able to rely on the availability of my business process. So we have an application discovery process, using that model, an analysis process to help you understand what the fit for purpose outcome would be. And we use this idea of looking at some of the key attributes of the application in terms of its portability and also then the infrastructure that it runs on. We essentially assign a complexity rating to that, and then we use that complexity rating to both determine the migration process and also the appropriate platform for it to run on. And so you'll typically see outcomes like this, non-production or non-critical assets having a really low criticality, standalone or very self-contained applications, ideal candidates typically for cloud environments, more highly integrated that will have multiple applications tied together with multiple data feeds. They get more challenging but can typically be migrated easily as well. And then you get into the kind of highly complex, typically business critical set of applications that are typically going to span multiple platforms with many interdependent data feeds at both data feeding across the applications and possibly data feeds across the infrastructure as you're bringing in outside feeds from standard lines from other organizations and things of that nature. And those become very challenging to break down and to understand how to execute a migration. And so as you think about cloud adoption, you're probably going to start at the top of this list and work your way down. So to kind of get back to this issue then of building a business case, again, if you're looking at private cloud, your opportunity is more tied to time to market than cost reduction. And as you look at the applicability of your applications to migrate into the cloud, if the vast majority fall in that highly complex and business critical world, you maybe don't have a lot of candidates. Correspondingly, if you can find a fair amount of your environment that is non-production and standalone, which is probably going to be a lot of the things that were early candidates that moved to a virtual environment. Migrating those to the cloud is probably significantly easier. However, if they don't have the characteristics of pretty significant rapid growth, if they've been essentially unchanging for large periods of time, then you really have to question the need to layer in all of the other capability that cloud gives you. So the development of the business case is this multi-dimensional aspect of the cost that you're going to spend, the nature of the applications that you have in terms of time to market pressure, the portability of your applications in terms of ease of migration, and then your willingness perhaps to look at public clouds where the economic return is probably much easier to quantify, but you get the challenges associated with perhaps security and this inability to truly baseline the robustness of that architecture, that just-in-case model that we talked about. So just to finish up the presentation and talk about one reference case that we've done some work for. This is a financial services organization based in the U.S. They manage various financial funds, most likely would be available in your 401k options. This company had been using an outsourced IT provider and was coming up on the end of their contract and wanted to consider various options. At the same time, they were looking at perhaps building a new data center based on some of the challenges they had with their existing facilities. And so we're going down the path of both focusing on running a new RFP for their service provider company, or sorry, their managed services company, and at the same time running an RFP to build and do a large-scale data center migration. Then their executive management made a decision, which was to halt both of those activities and to undertake a process to examine what cloud computing could do for their organization, and essentially move as much as possible of their application and infrastructure base into a public cloud environment. And so we were engaged to essentially go in and conduct that strategy engagement to understand their application set, to build them that risk profiling capability, to look at the various options in terms of public cloud providers, to essentially walk them through the migration challenges that they would face, and look at the candidate selection process from an application basis to determine what portion of the environment could be moved to public cloud, what portion they would continue to need to operate, and then ultimately, they were able to take that and refine their process of streamlining their next generation of both data center needs and managed services provider, as well as signing up a number of public cloud providers to move some of their estate to. Another example that I'll just reference, I don't have the slide here, but is on the service provider side, where we've been working with a large telecommunications company in Europe to develop their public cloud offering, and that offering is now gone to market. It is an x86 computing offering. GlassHouse was involved for about the last year in both the go-to-market strategy, the definition of those offerings, and the development of a significant amount of their governance and process model, as well as the integration into a number of their back-end systems around automated billing and those type of support functions. So that's the slide deck. As Natalia said, we wanted to leave some time here for some questions. So if there are some questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions? So like I mentioned before, we will be happy to email this presentation to you at the end of the call. This presentation, the recording, and the PowerPoint itself will be available on our site, and we'll notify you when that will go up. Any other questions for Richard? Okay, so thank you so much for joining us for today's webcast. As mentioned at the beginning of this call, we will be emailing you the presentation you saw today shortly. Should you have any additional questions, send them to me. My email is right on screen, and I will ensure Richard follows up with you. Join us next month when GlassHouse will be discussing the shifting data center, ensuring success amid risk and change. Have a great rest of your day.